All right, we're going to call the meeting to order for the Frontier Regional School District School Committee at 6 o'clock, February 10th. To start the meeting, we'll read the operational goals. The school committee's primary responsibility is to establish those purposes, programs, and procedures that will best produce the educational achievement needed by our students. The committee is charged with accomplishing this while also being responsible for wise management of resources available to the school district. The committee must fulfill these responsibilities by functioning primarily as a legislative body to formulate and adopt policy by selecting an executive officer to implement policy and by evaluating the results. It must carry out its functions openly while seeking the comments of the public, students, and staff in its decision-making processes. The first order is to review and approve the minutes from January 6th.
To approve, Madam Chair. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Damien is with us remotely. Yep, sorry. When you're remote, we'll do a roll call. Thank you. Jessica?
Yes.
Olivia?
Yes.
Celia?
Yes.
Mary?
Yep.
Bill?
Yes.
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 Yes. And Damien?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, this is the mini version for the financial statements and signing of the warrants.
I do not have much for fiscal year 26. So 28 warrants were reviewed by Bob. Thank you, Bob. The total on the warrants was $2,139,990.60. I intentionally did not send you the expense reports because my office, between payroll and accounts payable, is currently going through open purchase orders to see what needs to be closed or increased, as well as looking at payroll to ensure that everything we need for payroll is encumbered. For example, spring coaches need to be added into the system. The purpose behind that is so that we can really look at what's available for budget money. We did talk about that Frost last meeting, so I'm still analyzing all of that, and I didn't want to send you reports that really were not presenting accurate information. So that's it. There's no new concerns, though, with the budget, so that's good. That's good.
Thank you. Do we not have us?
We do.
Caitlin's on.
Caitlin's on,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Caitlin, are you ready with the student council report?
Yeah. So first off, I just want to say that we've had a good start to the second semester. So far, student council has come up with a Jeopardy night that's happening. What's happening? Oh, it's happening February 26th at 5:30 p.m. and it raises money for the Special Olympics. And the community members are invited. You can play for a cash prize. It's $5 for students and $10 for adults, and $2 to be a spectator. There was also a winter concert tonight that happened at 6:30, but if you missed it, they are also having a winter modern concert. An open house this Thursday at 6 p.m. The last week in February, the 8th grade will be going on their annual trip to Washington, D.C. And we are also having a Spirit Week / pep rally, which is also a wellness week, the first week in March. So each day will be dedicated to a different aspect of wellness. We have Movement Monday, Touch Grass Tuesday, Wellness Wednesday, Thankful Thursday, and Frontier Friday. So there's a wellness day in the wellness week. I don't really know. Okay, but so we'll do like various activities and workshops, like based off that stuff. There's also the musical coming up, which is Mary Poppins this year, and it'll be held on March 13th through 15th. So yeah. And then some stuff to add to your calendars is also student council will be hosting a student versus staff dodgeball event, which is Thursday, March 26th at 7 p.m. to raise money for Teacher Appreciation Week. It's going to be $5 for students and $7 for adults. And we encourage you to come out and cheer on your favorite students and staff members. And that's really all I have for now.
Thank you. You guys are feeling optimistic about touching grass the first week of March?
I was thinking the same exact thing.
I will cross my fingers. We can do that.
We're going to touch snow.
Thank you, Caitlin. George,
Yeah, and so just echoing a couple things that Caitlin said. So the DC trip is still happening with 8th grade. We're really glad that we're still able to offer that to our 8th grade students. And we'll also be hosting local trips as well for students that aren't going to DC. But this year, once again, they'll be going to the Kennedy Center, the Holocaust Museum, and other places as well. Every year we administer a health survey to grades 8, 10, and 12. So this year we're administering it this week in conjunction with Communities That Care Coalition. And basically this is a survey that talks about mental well-being. It surveys students about their health, whether or not, concerns about mental health, concerns about drugs and alcohol, and we do this for 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. We've been doing this for probably close to 20 years, so we can actually analyze the data in a really useful way. So we're going to be administering that this week, and then we'll have a chance to debrief as an administrative team in a month or two. Our career fair and reality fair is happening again on March 25th, and this has been happening. In large part, I want to give a public shout out to Christine Wu, who does an amazing job organizing this. She gets all sorts of folks to come to meet with our students. She does employer panels. There's a job fair that sets up. So it's a wonderful opportunity for our kids. And last but not least, I do want to congratulate Lynette Varnon, who is one of our high school English teachers and our English department chair. So she was awarded, and it's not pronounced Capita, I believe it's pronounced Capitan Prize. This prize recognizes an outstanding high school teacher that exhibits exemplary character, integrity, honor, and leadership. As part of the prize, she's awarded $10,000, which she can use for a trip, and she's going to be using it to go to Scotland to learn bookbinding. So she'll be doing that next week. So we're very proud of Lynette for that.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And correct me if I'm wrong, not the first time that one of our teachers have gotten the science teacher a few years ago.
So this is not
No,
the
I
principal.
know, but
Yeah.
it's nice to have
Oh,
our staff
absolutely.
be recognized in such a nice.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
esteemed
Lynette's
way.
awesome. And then just a few other things. We just had our 6th grade parent night last week, which was well attended. Next week is winter break. Caitlin already mentioned Mary Poppins, and then just so everybody knows, March 6th early release resumes, and we'll be picking back up with PD for staff.
Thank you. See, we have several members of our select board and finance committee locally. I don't know if any of you are here intentionally for public comment, but thought I would. And I don't know if somebody joined. Is that also one of you guys? For the, okay. Perfect. In that case, I turn it over to Shelley.
All right. Sure. Okay, so a lot of what you're going to hear at the beginning of this presentation mimics what we presented in January, because I want to recap on what we discussed at that point. There's also a lot of new information that normally I would probably wait till public hearing to go over, but it felt like, given us having the earlier conversation around this and for educational pieces, with a couple new committee members and knowing that we were going to have some public hearing, I felt like we should go into a little bit more detail on things. So first slide, we're going to talk about how the budget is developed. Okay. So the first steps of the budget start in late fall, early winter. So November, December, the administrative team starts looking at the needs in the building based on level services, as well as any new initiatives that may come up. We really develop that first draft. We look at having a needs-based, student-centered, but also fiscally responsible budget. We always start that first pass with level service, not level funding. So level service does result in growth of the budget versus level funding would mean that you were actually not increasing over your prior year. Then we look at new needs and initiatives, and then we analyze our supplemental funds. So all of our grant and revolving funds, we take a close look at those as well. January, the budget subcommittee meets, and typically there's not much of a presentation at the January meeting to school committee because we don't have the governor's budget yet. We don't have an idea of what our revenue is going to look like. We started that process a little bit earlier this year because of the level service budget increase that we were looking at. February, we continue deliberations at this level, and in March, we have our public hearing, which is on March 3rd. And then right now on the calendar, the next meeting would be March 5th, which would be our vote to adopt the budget. And then our member towns have their annual town meetings between April and June. The first town meeting, I believe, is Sunderland, which is on Friday the 24th of April. And that's why we have to vote in March, because by law, we have to have our budget adopted 45 days ahead of our first town meeting. So looking at the level service budget for the new year, again, we're replicating, you can click one more. Same program, same staffing, same services as the current year in the new fiscal year, but we are increasing costs based primarily on usually our contractual wage obligations, and then other wage increases for school-based staff that are not on contracts and central office as well. And then we take into consideration adjustments for non-wage expenses. Usually at Frontier, those are very minimal. However, this year the story is a little bit different because of our insurance costs going up and then some other funding source changes that we're going to get into. So total level service budget came in at just over $14.2 million, which was a 6.95% increase over fiscal year 26 at $923,000. This is slightly lower than we talked about last month. I believe the original presentation was 7.12. There were some personnel changes, and also Franklin Regional Retirement Assessment came in since the January meeting, so I made those adjustments, which is bringing us just under 7. Not a huge change, but in case you had that number in your head, it is slightly down a little bit. So what goes into our level service budget? These are the different expense categories. I know there's a lot on this slide. I'm going to email out the slideshow to you all because this is good education for you to have. And then I believe Raquel is posting the slideshows on the website under the school committee meeting minutes, so public will be able to access them there. But if we can go one more slide, Darius. What that means for us as far as those expense categories that are broken down by DESE, those are not set by us as a school, so instruction is exactly what it sounds like, any personnel or non-personnel expenditures related to teaching and learning. Student services is our transportation, costs of our health office, athletics, student activities, anything that's not directly educating our students in that category. Operations and maintenance is building, IT, and facilities. Administration is expenditures related to central office and school committee. It is not principal's office when you think of administration. That falls under instruction because all of those staff members help to directly provide education to our students. Benefits and insurance is self-explanatory. There is a cost-sharing component in all of these categories that I will mention, particularly benefits and insurance, because Frontier does pay a portion of central office expenditures, including benefits. And then out-of-district placement is the category where any of our expenses fall into where we have students coming into our district who were not able to meet their special education needs, and we have to outplace them in a specialized program. So you can see the growth in that last column on the right from fiscal year 26 to 27 and the $923,000 there at the bottom. We're going to break down those expenditures further in the next couple slides. So our non-wage growth is pretty significant this year. We have not had non-wage growth like this in my tenure. This is, I think, my 8th budget season, and this is certainly an anomaly for Frontier. The primary growth of the 4.67% and the $620,000 can be attributed to health insurance. That is the most significant factor of that $515,000 of actual expense increase. There was also an increase in our retirement assessment. That happens annually. And then our liability and workers' comp insurance is also seeing some growth there. The health insurance is twofold. Anyone with Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust, which we've talked about at great detail here at school committee, there was an October 1st increase that was not budgeted in fiscal year 26. We have to roll that into fiscal year 27 as part of our starting budget, and then we have in a 20% placeholder. Rates are not set by the trust yet. The next IAC meeting, I want to say, is the 28th of this month, where there will be a proposal and then a vote amongst that group. I don't think we're going to fall much lower than 20% though when that comes through. The other impact for non-wage growth, I mentioned on that first slide that we do an analysis of all of our revolving fund and grant sources to see if there's any change in those funds. Last year, the budget supported, or fiscal year 26, we had support from rural aid of $100,000 on the budget and school choice of $100,000 on the budget. When we look at level services, I put those expenditures back. We can continue conversations about the use of those funds, but if those funds did not exist, we want to know in the level service budget what our true cost would be. That growth with these changes is totals $105,000. We're receiving a little bit more circuit breaker money, so I was actually able to relieve the budget there. So that helps make up for some of that difference from school choice and rural aid. So $620,000 of our $923 is stemming from non-wage growth, primarily related to health insurance increases. Next slide breaks down our wages. Left hand of the slide shows our non-union personnel. So that is anyone who is building-based, not on a contract. So secretaries, custodians, cafeteria staff, central office staff, principal's office staff, anyone who is not on a union contract falls in that category. That is about a $40,000 increase, and then union is on the right hand of the slide. You can see that Unit A is making up the bulk of that growth of the overall $303,000. This is typical. We have a lot of teachers in our building comparatively to the other non-union staff, and we did settle a contract. We are going into year 2. Top step will see a 4% COLA. Am I saying something wrong?
Nope, you're saying something about just identify Unit A versus Unit C for our guests. 'Cause they may-
I will, yep. So Unit A is the teacher contract, and Unit C is our instructional assistants or paraprofessionals. So Unit A is having a 4% growth at the top step. If anyone else is stepping within the contract, the step varies for Frontier. It's not a standard 3% per step, so there could be, with a 3% COLA plus the step, up to 9% depending on where you fall on the salary schedule. We have no column advancement happening next year, which would mean that someone has obtained additional postgraduate credits and are advancing their degree. There's nothing impacting the budget. When that happens, the increases for those staff could be upwards of 10%. So I think it's a good thing for us to be aware of that that's not impacting our growth. Unit C is our instructional assistants. We were able to reduce the budget by 2 full-time equivalent IAs for next year based on attrition of things that have happened in the current year. So we've had some changes with students and some changes with staffing already. George took that back to his instructional leadership team and was able to say, we can start off by reducing 2 positions. However, anyone else that still falls within that contract, everyone will move up because we added a new step, 2.5% COLA plus the 3% step. So instructional assistants will see a 5.5% raise in the new year. The contract also had some growth for department heads, clubs, coaches, and advisors, so we've added about $9,000 for that as well. Any questions before we keep going? Okay. Just to bring us back, total growth was 6.95% at level services, 923,000, which gives us,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. 4.67% growth of non-wage expenses, and then 2.28% for wage expenditures. Questions? Okay. So let's talk about historically. Darius mentioned this at our last meeting, that usually we're falling, and you can see here from this slide, somewhere around a $300,000 growth, or about 3% annually on our general fund budget. This year is the anomaly. It truly is an outlier. And what I will say about these prior years is coming in at that 2.5%, 3.5% was level service funded. The growth really was related to COLA increases and maybe some minor non-wage growth, but really it's been salary and wage driven. We haven't made reductions. Last year, the 2.2 came into play because we did use rural aid and we did use an additional 100,000 of school choice. We were slightly above the 3%. After getting feedback at public hearing and talking with our towns, we voted to bring that down slightly. But there really has been level service funding year to year. So let's talk about next our other funding sources and our total cost to educate Frontier students, because we do utilize grants and revolving funds to help supplement the general fund so that the general fund is not as high. So the next slide breaks down, and I'm not going to go slide by slide again, I will or line by line. I will email this to you so you can dive into it deeper. But you can see our grants and revolving funds, if you look at that total on the bottom line, are just about level funded from the prior year. Any growth here really is attributed to wage increases for each of these different funding sources, which just comes out of the contract. Next slide shows total general fund plus our revolving funds and grants for a total budget of $16.658 million. What that breaks down to for cost per student is about $27,500 based on 606 students. We do have a change in enrollment. We're down 12 residents, but up 22 in school choice. Enrollment is always based on your October 1st numbers from the prior year. That's how Chapter 70 is taken into consideration, and the formula plays out based on that October 1st. So those numbers will fluctuate when we actually are enrolled in September, but right now as they stand. All right, so let's get into how our budget is funded. Chapter 70 is the first piece of the budget that we look at. It is the major program of state aid to public elementary and secondary schools. It also establishes what the state is going to pay based on a foundation budget, which is based on enrollment, but also sets what each of our member towns in a school district can afford to pay to educate students. Again, a lot of words on this slide, but ultimately Chapter 70, it's very complicated, but to break it down as simply as I can for us, there's a foundation budget calculation in the formula which takes into consideration resident enrollment, including students who choose to go to another public school. So if we have a student that's school choicing to another district, we are getting credit for that in our foundation enrollment, which I think is important to point out. We talk a lot about the flip side of students coming in and how we only get $5,000 per student, but in the Chapter 70 formula, we do get credit for students who are choicing out of the district. So again, resident students choosing to go to another school, and then there are percentage assumptions in the formula that account for low income and out of district students as well as English language learners. The second component of Chapter 70 is what the state determines based on the formula that our member towns can afford to pay to educate our resident students. That part of the equation is based on the property values and resident incomes in each of the towns. The third piece, and this is where it comes into play for us as something that's important and is going to demonstrate on the next slide, is something called hold harmless. So the state says if you have declining or stagnant enrollment, a district cannot receive any less funding than the prior year. There is a minimum per pupil calculation that comes into the formula, which is how we receive additional Chapter 70 money, because our numbers are either staying the same or going down year to year. Next slide. How much money will Frontier receive in Chapter 70 aid? So the first part on the top of this slide is what the formula calculation would equate to. The state says, based on our enrollment and our town minimum required contribution, we would receive $1.3 million in Chapter 70 funding. What actually happens is because we're in hold harmless, we cannot receive less than the prior year, and we will get an additional $75 per pupil, which is based on the current governor's budget. FY26 is $150 per pupil. That could grow as the budget process continues with the state, but we always are conservative and go off of what the governor's budget presents. So we will see an increase of $35,000. That's it, $35,000 more than the prior year for Chapter 70 funding. So we're talking about a $923,000 growth in our budget, and we're only going to get $35,000 more from the state. So, outside of Chapter 70, which is...
That was well done and dramatic.
I was trying, I'm gonna break the ice a little bit here.
Right.
So on this slide, the last thing I'll say before we go on is that $3 million that we receive in Chapter 70 funding is only 22% of our general fund budget. Do the math quickly. We have a $14 million budget. We're only getting $3 million from the state. Guess where the rest of the money is coming from? Primarily our member towns. So let's look at other funding sources on the next slides. So we do take into consideration in our budget state transportation reimbursement, which is about $250,000. We help offset our budget and reduce our assessments by applying $200,000 of excess and deficiency. The balance then comes from our local tax base and special revenues. Our local tax base is covering about 32% of the general fund budget. That is on top of what the state says that they're required to pay. And then we use our revolving funds and grants for the balance. Next slide gives you a visual of what that really looks like. And I intentionally made the two largest pieces of this pie similar in color. The dark orange is on the left bottom corner is the additional member town assessment that helps cover the remaining balance of our general fund. The lighter orange is what the state says that our towns can afford to pay. Those two pieces of the pie are making up, if you look at our whole budget, it's about 65%. If you're just looking at the general fund, it's about 75%. You can see from there, the green is Chapter 70 at $3 million. Purple is revolving funds and grants at about $2.5 million. Our revolving funds and grants are very similar to Chapter 70. And then we have the other two smaller components of excess and deficiency and state transportation reimbursement. Any questions before I keep going? Okay. So let's break down our member town assessment. According to our regional agreement, the costs of construction and operation are shared between member towns according to a 5-year rolling enrollment average. The bottom section here are the different components of our assessment. So the state required contribution that comes out of Chapter 70, additional that we need to meet to fund our budget, plus capital if we're proposing any capital expenditures, and any debt service that we might have, which is irrelevant this year. Frontier does not have any current debts. But those are the components based on our regional agreement. Let's first look at the Chapter 70 minimum town required contributions. So the state says our 4 member towns can afford to fund about $5.8 million of our budget. The enrollment component is on the bottom left of the slide. You can see here that Conway, Deerfield are having a decrease in foundation enrollment. Sunderland is seeing a growth in foundation enrollment, and Whately is flat, and overall we're down 2 students compared to the prior year based on the foundation enrollment. That means that if you are seeing a decline in enrollment or level funded or level student population, your growth in what you can afford to pay is going to be minimal even before they look at your resident income and house values. Sunderland's growth of 8 students is going to automatically inflate their portion of what they can afford. On the right-hand side of the slide, it breaks down what that change is in actual dollar amount. So according to the state, Conway can afford to pay $27,000 more, Deerfield $32,000 more, Sunderland $125,000 more, and Whately is seeing a small decline of $2,000. So that total growth in the state required contribution is $183,000. We have zero control over what this looks like at the school level. This is what the state mandates that our towns have to cover. It's a lot of data on this slide. I'm not going to go over all of this, but it is important to see, I think, in especially fiscal year 26 to 27, you can see that $183,000 growth there. You can see the trajectory over the years. This demonstrates in that top line with Conway, if you look at 25 to 26 and then to 27. So in 25, Conway had about $1 million that the state said they could afford. In 26, that went down because there was a change in enrollment in what Conway's foundation enrollment calculation was. And because enrollment declined, there was a decrease in what the state said that they could afford to pay. That's kicking back up slightly because they did have a change of, I think, a decrease in 2 students. When you factor in the formula, it's equating to minimal growth. So this is just sort of showing you how each of the towns have ebbed and flow over the years. There have been other years where there are big jumps in Conway. Sunderland has had consistent growth year after year after year. Deerfield has as well, but I think it's been, you know, smaller amounts that they've grown.
I'm so sorry, can we go back a slide? Because it didn't quite add up. There's like, it's like down
The bottom left, the change category in the bottom left.
So
It
like
should be,
something is,
it should be 471,
I think it should be 471.
It is,
But then I'm wondering,
yeah.
And -1
Yeah.
would be the change.
yeah.
but I don't know which town.
I mean, I pulled this directly from Chapter 70, so I'll double check all of those numbers. I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me.
I just want to make sure that the
I
towns are.
think the total in that first column should be 471, and then it's -1.
But then it can't be. It can't
Oh, you're
be
looking at the numbers.
-9 and +8 and get -2. So like one of the towns is off by 1.
Okay, I'll double check the
Okay.
Chapter
Yeah,
70.
or you're saying it should be
Or the bottom,
471,
the
it should be.
bottom.
No, this
Some
one should be
is off. Could
471.
be
Yeah.
too. But while we're at it,
Yeah.
the slide that we were on, in the presentation that was being made, it was attributed the changes were attributed primarily to changes in enrollment. And I'll just use Conway as an example because I'm most familiar with that. The changes that were being discussed were primarily based on changes in resident income. And
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And so Conway's, and Phil's actually pointing out, and we've talked about this before, the state looks at wealth and resident income, which, as you folks in the audience know, has no real factor on your taxability other than unless those wealthy people are buying and building. And Conway actually did not receive rural aid because they looked at the wealth factor of the town and said it grew too much. And so how does the town of Conway grow too much in wealth factor? It has to be 1 or 2 individuals with very high incomes because they didn't have that much turnover in their town. So Phil's exactly correct. So as we say, we have the numbers of enrollment. We don't have the numbers without going through everybody's cherry sheets to get the idea of what the total income of each town is adjusting by. So,
But in
good
that
point, Phil.
example, from 25 to 26, it really was enrollment driven, why there was such a big decrease in that particular year. I think it was a drop off of like 12 Conway students. So
Okay.
when it goes the reverse, we tend to sometimes attribute it to other things, but it is a component of
Right.
Chapter 70. And I'll check the enrollment numbers on the Chapter 70 workbook. Okay.
Cost sharing?
Yep, let's go cost sharing. So cost sharing is based on the regional agreement and the 5-year rolling enrollment. If you look at that second row from the bottom of the total, you can see the change in each of the 4 towns and then the change overall all the way in the right-hand column. So we're down 49 students when we dropped off 2021 and added in 2026. That then correlates with the cost share depending on where you're going up or down. You can see Conway is having a slight decrease, same in Deerfield. Sunderland is going up, and then Whately's going down as well. Where this comes into play is that additional assessment above the minimum required contribution, so that other $5.7 million that our towns are going to pay, that gets broken up by these percentage points. That make sense? The next couple of slides just have some data for you. Again, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but what I did want to point out here is that in the last 4 fiscal years or school years, we've decreased in the 5-year rolling enrollment average by 155 students. can see that in the top chart. And then the bottom chart shows the change in cost sharing percentage for each of the 4 towns in the last fiscal year, in the last 4 fiscal years. And again, that cost sharing component impacts how much each town is assessed to fully fund our budget. So there's really been decline pretty much everywhere with the exception of Sunderland, who has continued to see resident growth year after year after year.
Right, I mean, the big change you're seeing is Sunderland is, Deerfield's falling from about 50% of our budget. We've always kind of just thrown that out there. They're gonna be closer to 45, and Sunderland's gonna move up to about 25%. So that's, or just over 25%, so they're taking on a bigger share.
Okay. So we talked about the minimum required contribution. This is the details on the additional assessment to fully fund the budget. So in fiscal year 27, that amount is about $4.8 million. You can see the growth over fiscal year 26 all the way back to 24. So we've grown the budget for that additional assessment that our member towns are covering pretty significantly over 4 budget cycles. But again, I want to point out that really was attributed primarily to COLA increases and minor increases. We've not added staff, we've not added programs. We have, except we funded them out of grants or other funding sources, but the general fund growth has really been related to contractual and non-contractual wages. This has the total in the bottom there. You can see of our, as a reminder, the general fund budget is about 14.2 million. Between the required contribution and then the additional assessment to our towns, our member towns are funding about 75% of our general fund budget, or $10.6 million. So what does that all break down to as far as the assessment numbers, which is really the most important piece? Everyone wants to know what's our growth over in the new year, how much do we have to cover of the school's budget? So the last column here demonstrates, based on the level service budget of 6.95% or $923,000, our assessments for Conway would come in at 8.14% over the prior year, 6.45% for Deerfield, 12.61 for Sunderland, and 6.49% growth for Whately. Any questions? The final step of the assessment calculation is a capital and debt assessment, which we're not really going to talk about in great detail here, but I did want to throw it on the slide as a component of the assessment. And we talked about this in January. If you can click again. We talked about the parking lot replacement project that we are looking to move forward with, which has an estimated cost of $1.1 million. And we discussed assessing our towns about 10% of that, which would equate to $110,000. The breakdown there by town, this would be on top of the general fund assessments that we showed on the last slide. $17,000 for Conway, $51,000 for Deerfield, $28,000 for Sunderland, and $12,000 for Whately. Capital is on the agenda to continue to talk about later. I just wanted you to see this because this would be on top of the general fund. So, where do we go from here? We had given a clue last meeting that we may be looking at budget reductions. We were going to go back behind the scenes and administratively do some work to try to bring the numbers down, and that's what we're going to talk about next in the next few slides. So we're looking to reduce the budget and the assessment to our member towns, and we are recommending a $400,000 budget reduction, of which we would use $100,000 of our rural aid money that is available, and reduce positions in the building, which would be about 6 or 7 positions depending on how we move forward, and that would be $300,000 in salary and wage cuts, which we're not prepared to discuss in detail tonight. We are still talking behind the scenes administratively of what that looks like, but we wanted to have the conversation here about the number that we're hoping to get to, and we're going to show you what that assessment will look like. One more click shows what the general fund looks like with that adjustment. So with that adjustment, it would bring our growth down to $523,000, or just under 4% over the prior fiscal year, which reduces our assessments. very significantly, while still not wonderful for Sunderland, considering all of the factors and the elementary budget that we're discussing. However, it brought all of the other towns and also gave Sunderland about a 4% relief with a $400,000 reduction. So Conway's growth would be 3.84, down from 8.14. Deerfield from 6.45 to 2.44, Sunderland 12.61 to 8.58, and Whately 6.49 to 2.45. Questions or comments? Anything that you want to say before we keep going?
Do you have more slides that you're going to go through?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to go quickly through the next slides, but I wanted to throw in some school choice and charter data here. One, I received some questions from the committee offline to get a better understanding of what our finances look like with this funding source. Because if we are talking about cuts, we should also have the discussion of what money is available, and if we're talking about funding $1 million parking lot project, where are we getting that money from if we're only assessing our towns $100,000? So there's a lot of data here, and again, I'm going to email these to you. You can absorb it, write me questions, we can come back to it next month, but I wanted to present it so that we have an overview. So there's two components of our charter and school choice revolving money that comes in. It all goes into a revolving fund and is held in the same pot, which is why I'm breaking it out separately here. We're going to talk about charter in the first section. So charter schools are independent public schools designed to encourage innovative educational practices. That is according to DESE and this MGL, that is why they're established, not my personal opinion. They're funded through tuition charges assessed against the school districts where the students reside. So in Frontier's case, Frontier receives Chapter 70 revenue through the state, and we are assessed for any resident students in our 4 towns that choose to go to a charter school. At the elementary level, the town is assessed for any component of that might come into play there. There's a revenue component as well. The state, oh, sorry, I was waiting for you to click. So we do receive, sorry, we receive partial reimbursement to sending districts for the tuition costs incurred. So click one more time. So the expenditures are broken down, again, based on a formula from the state. So similar to Chapter 70, there's a foundation calculation. They create a budget. There is a formula in there that takes anything above foundation spending as well as a facilities fee, and that's what the district is assessed to pay out for students going out of district to charter schools. On the revenue side, it is also formula driven, and it is a partial reimbursement to the regional district to offset the loss of funds. The next slide demonstrates the revenue coming in versus the assessment going out, and you can see it's kind of laughable what the reimbursement amount is compared to our assessment. Both of those factors, there's an enrollment component taken into consideration there. In the assessment piece, there is a per student charge. So you can see that our charter assessments have gone down significantly over the last 5 years, which means we have less students choosing charter schools over our school. The revenue doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense as far as the formula goes, because you can see we were assessed more in 21 but received less revenue, and then it goes up from there. But the revenue comes down when the enrollment goes down and the assessment goes down, because you're reimbursed based on your charges going out. The thing that I want everyone to understand on this slide is in this last column where it says the net, you can see we are losing money, for lack of a better word, on students going out of school choosing charter schools over our regional school. This is important because when we talk about school choice and our general fund budget, if we were not on the positive end of school choice, we would have to fund this elsewhere. We would have to have a line item to cover in 2025. I didn't give you 26 info because it's still preliminary. They haven't released all of the data yet. But in 2025, our budget would have been up $305,000 if we didn't have positive school choice revenue to offset our charter, which at $300,000, it's multiple percentage points. So we really need, if we can go to...
Well, and just to kind of jump on that as well, as we talked about that where we were able to pay down some of our capital projects because of the influx of money as the number of students going out came down at the same time. Because remember, we are just kind of saying that to also the guests that at one point, you know, if you go back far enough, when I was principal, we were almost 50-50. We were barely breaking even. Maybe we were $50,000 over the mark about those going out. We've become a very attractive school to go to, and keeping our own students with the programs and such we put into place, and with less students going out and more students coming in. So it's been a very good, you know, obviously in the positives. Our neighboring towns, it's kind of like, it's a game we didn't design, but we do, and I have to say it out loud, we do take from our neighboring schools and leave them with deficits. And you can read in the paper where they, you know, would not like the choice thing to be still active because the amount of students that, especially northern schools, sending down to us from Greenfield, Montague, and even some of the other schools as they're getting smaller and smaller and losing, you know, losing programs that their children are interested in. They're now, you know, they're making decisions to leave those programs to go to schools that have their program, that have the programs from the arts to the amount of electives to, you know, and so forth, you know, those kind of things. So I'm just kind of getting on that,
Yep.
mentioning that as well.
Can I ask two questions? One, this doesn't include tech kids, right? And the second is, how many students does this represent leaving the district roughly?
I have it for 25. I don't have the 26.
Yeah, I just want general.
Just give me 1 second. I didn't have that on the slide up. So in 25, they do it based on FTE because if students choose to go mid-year. So in 2025, there were 16.4 students choosing to go to a charter school. In 2021, there were 44. So it's significantly gone down.
And also understand, for those who don't follow it, that charter school tuition costs are 4 times the amount of school choice reimbursement. So for every student we get at school choice, we get $5,000 plus sped increments if there's any other additional, you know, costs that may be associated. But $5,000, any student that's going out to charter schools is around 21, I think it's 21,000-ish. So for every charter school student that goes out, we have to get 4 school choice students to make up for that number. And then school choice is school choice. We have students who do actually choice out, believe it or not. That's, you know, even Stephen too. It's the 5,000 number there.
Okay, so Darius sort of went over some of these things on the next few slides for
sorry.
me. Thank you for giving me a break.
Well, I was giving you a break,
breather. I
thank you.
needed that. So how does school choice work? School choice is the interdistrict program that allows families to enroll their children in schools and communities other than the city or town in which they reside. Tuition is paid by the sending district to the receiving district. So again, this is another assessment that the state automatically deducts from your Chapter 70 or at the town level if they have other unrestricted aid that they're getting from the state. It's automatically deducted. We have no control over this because it's based on enrollment. And as Darius said, if you click one more, the tuition rate is $5,000 per student plus special education increment claims. So let's talk about how Frontier benefits. Darius did just get into this a little bit. So expanded enrollment allows for increase and enhanced curricular and extracurricular offerings. So more advanced placement courses, competitive and athletic programs, advanced arts and music, expanded special education programs. I think it goes way beyond this. I have 2 students here. I have a senior and a sophomore, and the amount of connections that they have in our surrounding communities is invaluable to them, I think, as learning how to navigate life and interact with people in different ways. And there's so many other things that we don't have listed here on the slides, but I think that the advanced placement is something that's critical, and then athletics and arts is critical as well. As Darius mentioned, we see other schools closing athletic programs and eliminating arts and music programs, and we're able to have these phenomenal musicals and have really competitive athletic programs, which is why people continue to come here. So big benefit. Okay, so let's talk about the numbers and what they break down to. So I have school choice receiving, which is the revenue side, and then the school choice sending, which is when we have students choosing to go out of district. That's our assessment. So this is the opposite of charter. So our receiving is higher. We're getting in more revenue because we have more students coming in than we have students sending out, which, you know, we don't want a lot of students choosing to go out of district. So it's nice to see that number continuing to come down year after year after year as well. The net on the end shows you the revenue coming in, assessment going out, and how we make out. So in 2025, that 1.5 million that was the net of school choice, that helps cover that $300,000 in charter assessment that we had to pay. Again, based on enrollment, something the state automatically deducts from our aid. The next slide shows the net change of these two components. So net charter, net choice, overall net. So looking at 2025 as that example, the last slide showed 1.5 million in school choice coming in, deduct the 305 for charter, and we end up with a net of $1.2 million.
So when it's like the base for school choice, the base is the $5,000, and then when it says special education claims, I think that was the language, like, it seems like that must potentially be kind of large amounts for some kids.
It is. It can be very large for some kids, and it is something that we have to keep internally a really close watch on.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using some of that money to help offset other expenditures.
Yeah.
If you're only using that money for that student's IA or their transportation, it becomes a wash, but it's something that we have to be aware of internally. And it's part of why our numbers are so high. We do have some students coming in from other districts who are school choice students that have significant special education needs.
Can you give me like a ballpark of how much that could be for a student?
Well, if a student has a one-to-one, it could be $35,000
Okay.
increment on top.
Yeah.
If you're receiving just speech services, 90 minutes a week,
Yeah.
you're talking, a couple $1,000s.
That's very helpful.
So it ranges to that whole thing. And so, and we do have significant special education programs in this building. And so we both do a tuition-based and school choice-based on those programs, depending on who we're working with and stuff. So if you pull up a Comiskey arrival, and you'll see vans from other school districts, and you're like, why are there other school districts van here? Our special ed programming that we have here is desirable by other districts because they can't build the programs in-house, or they want, based on what we can provide here. So we take in tuition, and there's I don't want to say there's profit in it, but there's within the margin of what DESE lets us to charge to, pay for administrative fees and pay for those other kind of things in that as well. So,
Some people might not know this, and correct me if I'm wrong, on charter, 4 years going to a charter school, you get reimbursed more the first year than the last year.
Yes,
So
the
it
formula
continuously
does that. Yep.
goes down from year 1 to year 4. I mean, you may get 20 the first year, but you only may get 5 the last year. I'm not sure how they came up with that formula, but.
I saw Julie had a hand raised.
Yeah, just for folks who aren't familiar with this is a little out of the norm to have the folks who are here in public join the conversation, but because we are both vested in your opinion of this, and it's in all of our best interest to have this discussion as openly as we can. Go ahead. Julie, you have a question.
I just thought Darius should also mention that by having those special ed programs here, that means we're not tuitioning out kids that we might be otherwise, which also saves us a lot of money.
absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Okay, so you've seen the numbers, we've talked a little bit about the math. Let's talk about how we use school choice and charter money. So school choice and charter money, whatever that net end result is, helps offset our general fund budget. We have 8 positions in fiscal year 27 that are being paid for from school choice. Whether they're teachers or IAs, their salaries and wages. We also help fund our special education transportation and some of our out-of-district tuition. Not all of it, but some of it. It just helps keep our general fund budget lower if we have these alternative funding sources. We've also been able to, over the years, use school choice / charter money to help reduce our capital assessments to our towns. So capital projects that we've been able to fund ourselves include paying off our $930,000 bond anticipation note, which was for the large track project. We used $275,000 of school choice money to cover our boiler replacement. We funded some of our roof replacement with school choice at $465,000 and also put in $250,000 to our tennis court replacement project. So this is a significant component of our school choice money. If we did not have the level of school choice students that we have and the amount of revenue coming in, our towns would have had to cover this additional expenditures.
And we were lining up, there's more in that account right now because we're trying to line up to pay for a big chunk of the $1.1 million parking lot project. So, and we also have some roof projects coming down the phase 1, and there's 3 phases in the roof projects, all at least $500,000 for each one. So, and it's kind of I know there's conversations that you hear in the community, they're sitting on too much school choice, why don't they just bring down the budget with school choice? If you start tying into, you can choose where you want to put your money. We can assess the towns for capital projects, or we can pick up the capital projects and then not have a fake budget where as that number comes down, then we're going to have to either assess our way out of it or cut our way out of it and that kind of thing. So it's kind of the choice. It's also, we've also had an increase in school choice. I would say it grew faster than we expected because while we can control the numbers coming in, we don't control the numbers coming out, and we've had a perfect storm following COVID where every year the numbers going out and they were graduating at the charter schools and they weren't refilling numbers, we were receiving even more money as well. So, and I think Shelley's slide a couple slides back showed that over the last few years, that amount has increased. So, anyways, that's why it's also important that we're looking at a capital project that we aren't planning on taking out a bond or a large assessment to the towns to do as part of this. So.
Okay, so the next slide shows us the actual numbers. So we've talked a lot about how we come up with our money every year, whether it's revenue in, revenue out. There's a lot of info on here, and I know it's small. So what's on this slide shows our start of year fund balance, choice and charter revenue coming in. That's the net choice and charter revenue coming in. Operating expenses, capital expenses, and then our end of year balance. So if you look at the second row from the bottom, in 2026, we started the current fiscal year with a fund balance of $1.9 million. You can see our estimated revenue of 1.1, expenses going out of 1.3, and then the end of year balance of 1.7 million. Going into 27, that carries over for next year, 1.7 start of year, so on and so forth. And those are just estimated right now. I have to wait for DESE to release enrollment numbers, which they're launching a new system for school choice that was supposed to be launched 3 months ago and it's still not ready. So I don't have actual data, which I would normally have right now for 26. But the anticipated balance at the end of the current fiscal year would be 1.7, which is where our conversation came in about using some of that money to help fund the parking lot, not having to take out another bond anticipation note, which ultimately is an expense to our town because we are paying interest and they will have to pay back that note, and also keeping that assessment for the parking lot project as low as we possibly can. Questions about this before we go one more slide? Okay. So Darius mentioned this a little bit. You know, there's always that conversation out there of like, wow, you're holding on to so much school choice money. Why aren't you using it to help offset your budget? Somebody might be thinking, if you have all that money, why are you cutting positions? There's always some risk in using school choice funds for recurring expenditures. It's a higher risk than using it for capital projects because capital projects are a one-time expense. As Celia pointed out, some of our revenue coming in is due to special education increments, which may be helping offset other expenses. So if we see an enrollment decline in school choice or a change in what our enrollment looks like, our revenue goes down. The more we stack recurring expenditures, the harder it could be in future fiscal years, which some may have the opinion, well, let's worry about the future fiscal years in the future. I feel like I have a responsibility to make sure that you understand what that impact is as we make decisions. So I am always in favor of doing the one-time expenditures. And we have things coming up. The parking lot is a now. We need to fix our parking lot. The roof is future, and the future is not that far away. We're only talking a couple of years, which will be another $500,000. So that's all I had on this one, unless you have anything else. Any questions?
I have another question. I'm wondering, like, this is a sort of a charter school question, but kids who are, is anybody like paying, I mean, I'm assuming we know which, or you guys know which charter schools the kids are going to.
Yes.
And so, like, is anybody like got their finger on the pulse of the trends of charter schools? And like, anybody have like a sense of like, we anticipate more kids going because charter schools are looking really strong. We anticipate more kids staying at Frontier because Frontier has competitive sort of programming that would help kids stay. I mean, obviously kids are staying, right? I mean, obviously those numbers show that Frontier is doing well in that decision point for families who are thinking about it. But I guess I feel like it's such a big factor. I'm sort of wondering if you have thoughts about what's the pulse on the charter school situation?
And I think it's changed over time. You know, I've been at this for a while, so to speak, where I've seen trends in charter where schools become popular, and they become popular for multiple reasons: word of mouth, the uniqueness of of what they're offering and how the community responds, the uniqueness of what they're offering and what we're offering in comparison sometimes. We use like Pioneer Performing Arts. We lost quite a few in the beginning when they first opened up. And I think we became competitive with, if it's not really some people leave because they want something different. And sometimes it's a good choice for that family because, not every system, while we try to make it perfect for everyone, it's not always perfect for everyone. So sometimes, there's little niches where they have friends or certain groups that they're following and that kind of thing. So you're going to get people leaving for various reasons. Even choice-wise, like if people like, why are you choosing that district? They don't have half the offerings of friends. Well, maybe they have friends there, families working there, that kind of thing. Members, their family went to that school and they want to carry that legacy in their high school. That happens as well. When I look at the performing arts school, and I've seen our numbers have gone way down on that, and because we built an art program over the last 10 years. That people are really involved in and that kind of stuff, and that feels that they don't have to go somewhere else to get that. There's still maybe people going there because they want even more than we're providing or something a little different than we're providing, but that's kind of an example there. Right now, as you see overall, those charter numbers have come way down, from 40 to 16 over the last 5 years. That could change. I don't know what the current, again, you're looking at your 6th grade class usually, what that looks like. I know, so it's just kind of looking at that, and also I, ask our town bodies that see the outside of charters. We don't talk about the tech school, but the tech school is taking more and more students as it's grown. It's while the county shrinks, it's growing, and so there's a lot of discussion about what students are they taking, how many they're taking, and then how is that assessment to those? Because the way the tech school operates, you really, enrollment's up too, so that's why it's up. Enrollment's down too, so that's why it's down. But they're growing their budget. So, and the way they're set up with one school committee member of all 13 towns, there's not as much, I would say, oversight of how that's functioning. So I ask those boards to just keep an eye on that, because I have my disagreements of tech school growing when the county's shrinking, And if you're growing to less students going into college, that means your overall wealth of your county is going to, it's already the poorest county in the state, is going to become poorer. So that's my general overview. I can have that debate with somebody offline. But so I just ask that people keep an eye on that too, because we sit there, there's very questions on the tech budget at town meeting. So there you go.
Trevor?
Well, just to speak to that issue, tonight there's a meeting at GCC about their new $200-something billion building that's going to go in. I went to the meeting with Bob Decker maybe a month or so ago, the first meeting on that. This question came up, like you're cannibalizing, all the other schools. Well, I think it's a great education and it's good for a lot of families. They definitely recognize that there's a cap. They're not looking to just kind of continue to grow, and I think they're kind of looking to drop a little bit from where they are right now, especially going to the new school. So I think they recognize that they can't continue to just swallow up all the kids, and there has to be a happy balance there for sure.
Mhm.
But that's a big price tag.
Mhm.
I think they've actually made a firm commitment not to exceed current enrollment.
Correct.
In the new building. Not to exceed current rates of cannibalism in the new building. But, just to go to your earlier, the charter schools, that's been a long time bugaboo of mine, ever since the inequitable financing mechanisms were first established. And I always try to make a point of finding out local residents that are sending their kids there, making acquaintances and finding why. And I was surprised that a lot of the answers had to do with the conditions of the building. They like it when there's new building. They liked it when there was air conditioning. And I think that's one of the things that it was important that we now have a heat pump air conditioning thing in our schools now, and we can compete on that level. And then the other thing too, it's important to remind people that our budget, everything that we do is transparent. Anybody can come in and they can find out all of our sources of revenue, all of our expenditures. Every check out the door is a public record. The level of documentation that the charter schools have to provide is so much less. They have to provide some budgetary information, but they're allowed to keep whole categories of expenses private, including who are the equitable owners and investors, and how much the return on the investment is, all kinds of things like that. So that they're basically taking taxpayer money, and you don't have an insight into where it all goes with them. So that's always an important thing to me, to always remind the public that that's what you're really doing.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us back quickly to close this out, and then if there's continued discussion, we keep discussing. So, sorry. Recap and next steps. So we talked about a level service budget of 14.2 million, 6.95%, or 923,000 over fiscal year 26, which resulted in assessments of, as outlined here, Conway 8.14, Deerfield 6.45, Sunderland 12.61, and Whately 6.49%. We are recommending $400,000 in reductions, which is $300,000 of actual cuts in the budget, which will come from salaries and wages, and applying rural aid of $100,000 for a general fund of $13.8 million, or 3.94% over the prior fiscal year, which hands out in the assessments, dropping them down significantly, about 4 percentage points for each town. 3.84 for Conway, 2.44 for Deerfield, 8.58 for Sunderland, and 2.45 for Whately. And then we are still proposing to be up for discussion is $110,000 in a capital assessment for the parking lot project, and then you can see the breakdown there on the slide. So the last thing that I will say before we continue discussion is this is your budget. We've made a presentation based on the numbers and what we believe can be fiscally responsible reductions. We do not think we should dip further into school choice, even though we do have a healthy balance. We feel like we should use that for the parking lot and not recurring expenditures. And knowing what we know about the elementary budgets right now, this assessment seems much more reasonable for our member towns. So, I'm done.
I just want to say again, that I really appreciate all the work that you do to, both that goes into this, the guidance that you provide in terms of making recommendations that help us to be both sustainable and keep the services that we're able to keep and make the projects, the capital improvement projects that we're able to make. I really appreciate it, and you do such a great job of putting this together. I know, there's so many questions. Trevor had a hand up, but I think I've got Damien and Keith and Olivia as well.
Darius, can you back up one slide for me for the minutes?
Can you back one slide? Trevor, I saw your hand first, although Keith, you are...
No, I'm going to wait for the table and then I'll...
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
I just want to point out the presentation is something that the budget subcommittee approved prior. So this is, when we come to the whole committee, this is something that the budget subcommittee is recommending.
So I guess what I need to outline is that, so the next step in our budget process is we have a budget hearing in March, which is the next meeting.
I should say support.
Right, so what I'm just trying to, so for those first time through this, so at this point, we have to have a discussion about what number you want to move to the public hearing. The number at the public hearing can go down, but it can't go up. Okay, so we got to bring a number to the public hearing. And quite frankly, given the time frame, the way we set it up is that we have the public hearing on a Tuesday, and then we have the voting of the budget 2 days later. And then it gives us, we're like at the 48-day mark prior to the first town meeting. But we used to vote it all on the same night, and we got some feedback from the towns, like you're not really hearing feedback if you're voting at the same night because you don't put yourself any time to put into process there. So, basically what this discussion now has to come to is what number do you want the administration to put forward into the documentation for the public hearing? Does that make
And
sense?
how are we getting there is what we've proposed,
Right.
what we're comfortable with as a committee, or are we looking at other options?
Could you just repeat, can you just clarify that the number can go down but not up?
Correct. You
Say that
can't,
again?
after the public hearing, you can't raise the amount that you're going to discuss, because nobody complains when it goes down, they only complain when it goes
Yes,
up.
okay.
So you look at it that way. You can repost a public hearing and then raise it up, but
Yes.
given our timeline, you're not gonna really,
Okay.
that's not gonna really fly. So you really,
Adopt the number, vote on it as a committee, attend the budget training.
Yeah.
And then it can go to the public hearing, but it can only go this way.
it also, we have folks here, but there's also folks that aren't here, they're gonna get that, and they'll be able to come to the public hearing and give us their feedback on, this is basically where, your public hearings where you kind of want to close to land, and, and that's where you're getting feedback to adjust from that point on. All right, and then Damien.
Yeah, Olivia, did you have?
So just, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding this correct. So we had a lot of discussion about how we initiated a number of wonderful things, the pathways and the arts things to make ourselves, more enticing for people and to keep them here. Is there any, how will we make sure, I'm sure you guys would make sure, but losing 6 to 7 positions, is that going to make us
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're
less
looking
exciting?
we have done the groundwork to look at what positions will be. We are going at it with the focus of not changing offerings to students, not changing clubs and activities for students, and try to have the least impact as possible. And in general, it's going to be probably a combination of some teaching positions, some support positions, and some non-teaching positions. So, and it could range from 6 to 7. There's a few kind of moving pieces that we have to kind of let down, but the goal is to not change the student experience as much as possible. And, maybe there's a course based on sizes and that kind of stuff that, could happen within it, but overall, we'll bring that to the
I
next
just didn't
meeting.
want us to shoot ourselves in the foot. I didn't want us to shoot ourselves in the foot. We've been doing such a great job
Right, no,
moving
correct,
this direction.
yeah.
That's a good question.
Yep.
Damien?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I think you actually just answered my first question, was what the reductions were going to look like. But I guess I wanted to comment on what you talked about with the public hearing. And we can't go up, we can only go down. So my opinion would be, why not go in at the higher amount with no reductions? And see if people are okay with it. And then if there's a lot of pushback, then we can look at the reductions.
I think you have the benefit of not being in the room with the finance committees looking at
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a good question, right? Like, so I think it's a good question. Like, you can always go in high, you can always bring it down, but you really have to, at this point, at some point, you got to make decisions that says, listen, this is kind of what we're talking about, because, you know, we're in cooperation with our 4 towns. We're trying to figure out their budgets. So they want to know where we're going to kind of land, and how much do they need to put pressure on us to, if they can't afford the assessment that's coming their way, because at the same time, we have an elementary numbers that are going to be coming out as well. And so I'll be sharing that with the towns as soon as the school committees. It's basically this week, in Deerfield, it's next week, but or week after, 2 weeks because of the vacation week. You know, we're going to start releasing the elementary numbers as well. The two together, I know where that's going to land, and you know, we do need to. I think Frontier does need to reduce on multiple fronts. One, we have an unprecedented bill from the insurance, and the towns are taking the insurance on the chin as well, and we need to do our part in that. We've also had a reduction in enrollment over the last few years, and so I think it's fiscally responsible also to reduce our staffing there too. So, and so if we can do it in a way where we're saying administratively we'll have the least amount of impact. Still, any reduction has an impact, but the least amount of impact, I think that it's our responsibility to do that. I think if you go in with a high number and you're not playing an honest conversation, then you're not having an honest conversation, then people don't like not honest conversations, they're not as friendly. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
If you look at those numbers that are associated with the original 7% budget, you know they're not going to pass. The last thing, and I've said this before, the last thing you want is to have that budget number adjusted on town meeting floor. You guys have seen it happen. Because you vote one, and she votes another one, and you get all of a sudden, we have 3 different versions of the budget voted by 3 different towns, because it was a free-for-all, reducing the number. We've got to come to a compromise between the towns and us on what that number should be, so it's the same in all 4 towns and the island. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that that one wasn't going to pass. Okay, we had to do something. So this is what we're recommending you do, and we're hoping that it helps the towns, because they have the same problems with insurance that we have and all those other things. That's the way the budget subcommittee wants us to play it. So.
And I think if you look at it, there's only so much wiggle room that we have control over, because there's so much of this that is associated with the insurance that it really doesn't leave us a whole lot of play.
Yeah, the gambling's not worth the gambling.
Yeah.
Really not.
Go ahead, Diane.
So 2 questions. One, is there any portion that you foresee, I know you don't know for sure yet, but of those staffing reductions that are through attrition or retirement or unfilled positions?
Those are being considered as part of it.
Okay. Do you know how much of it, or?
The majority of it.
I'm sorry?
The majority of it.
At least
Well,
it's making me
at least
feel
half,
better.
yeah, half, 60%.
And then the second, I mean, I know the parking lot is capital, and we're talking here operating expenses, and yet I'm still trying to wrap my brain around spending $1 million on a parking lot and letting people go at the same time, especially when that school choice money, while it's not guaranteed, is pretty gosh darn regular. And so can you just talk about your thinking about that over the budget committee? I'm just...
Sure. So, taking a step back, I
Because the
think,
parking lot's not so bad.
but I do, parking lot aside, right, I do think budgets do have ups and flows. We've been in this room and I've asked to increase positions. I think I say this to my principals all the time, if you have to be in a leadership position, you have to say, if I can come to you and ask for more money to increase position, I also have to be able to make the decision that says, we're going to have to reduce position, right? And I know people's livelihoods and stuff are, we control a lot of that, a really heavy part when we start talking about health insurance and those kind of things. We have those lives in our hands and that thing, but there is the natural course of the business. So I kind of say that out loud, where nobody wants to see anybody lose a job or that kind of thing. It is part of the business of doing this. When I look at the capital projects, we're starting to get to a level of a safety issue out in that parking lot, between the potholes and whatnot. We remember that we brought this parking lot project forward in 2018, and we've done some patchwork, and that, we did $20,000 worth of patchwork last year, and you can't even tell. It actually just makes the stuff next to it look twice as bad. So it is kind of one of those things. There's nothing, as I said, the parking lot's like new tires in your car, right? Like, unless you're really a performance person, you're like, really, I just spent for new tires in the car, I really can't tell. It's like the last thing you want to spend when it comes to education. So, there has, if we were cutting the arts versus the parking lot will be gravel, right? Like, there is some, I'm hoping that what we'll bring forward to show you what those positions are will be something that we'll be able to swallow. It won't be something that is just an unacceptable level of changing. Like I said, we're going to try to not change programming, not change offering to students both extracurricular from the arts all the way through. So that kind of makes sense. It is, if we don't do the parking lot this year, we're now a year behind for the following year, and then we're going to start having leaks in the other section of the roof. And then all the other kind of things that are going to come up in a mid-age building. So, that's why, I think that's also why the towns, they have a capital committee outside their budget, because you have to continue to maintain your assets. And if you don't, you'll get so far behind that you'll end up having problems that you can't do.
I work at UMass, which is the Center of Deferred Maintenance.
That is true.
Sorry, Trevor. Two things to add to that response really quick is we have the money in school choice. If we funded that $300,000 for the next 2 years, we're down to the 1.1 million, and we can't continue to maintain that. So there does become a point where we're going to have to look at the reductions, and now feels appropriate based on enrollment. I also think the other component of it is there's only so much our towns can afford. If our budget's 14.2 million and we're only seeing 3 million from the state, the rest is all falling on the local tax base. And I think we have to be cognizant of how much our towns can continue to afford, or if they have to get overrides to raise taxes. There's so many factors that go into it. But it's a valid point. I think somebody's going to ask that question.
I think too that the health insurance problem is not going to go away, and it's an incredibly generous health insurance benefit package, comparably. And so I feel like that's going to come on the table at some point about whether we can sustain such a generous benefit package. I'm not proposing that we cut it. I'd be the last person to do that. I'm just saying that I can foresee in a couple of years it becomes so unsustainable that we're thinking, okay, is no deductible, no copay, et cetera, something that we can really afford?
And I think you bring up some good points with that as well. I think health insurance this year has also been put right on a lot of people's radars. What is their benefit and what is the cost? So when we look at comparable salaries, but what are the benefits? And people are taking a longer look at health insurance than they ever have in the past, just to look at that as a benefit. So rather than whether or not that changes and comes down, you're going to have to negotiate out. Good luck with that. But the other side of it is just kind of celebrating the fact that it is a strong benefit. While, if you're taking home $80,000 as a teacher, but your health insurance benefit is worth another $10,000 compared to a neighboring district, that's an important thing that we probably have to highlight more. The other thing I also want to talk about is the amount of school choice revenue that we should be holding on to has also increased because the cost of everything else has increased. And I was talking with Shelley, so I have concerns about if the health insurance, they said we're not going to be done in 1 year. And I think the towns have probably heard the same thing. This may be a 2 or 3 year problem. If there was something to go wrong with the trust, we have a responsibility to our staff to continue insurance. And we need to have backup funds, because as a regional district, unlike the town, the elementary schools, we can't go easily to the town and say, hey, can you float us a couple $100,000? We have to have those kind of in reserves too. So I want people also to understand that, you know, I was saying it'd be safe, like I would be holding $500,000 and just labeling insurance right now. Because if we ever have to leave or we try to do any kind of transition, there's gonna be an upfront cost to it. So we need to be kind of holding some money aside for that as well. We always talk about that, you know, tuition, if you can get out of district tuition, it just hit, you know, Sunderland just had this happen this year, $160,000 outplacement, bingo, right out of the budget. So you have to have a couple, $200,000, if not $400,000 worth of just ready for emergency, out of district placements.
Rainy day fund.
It's a rainy day fund, but it's a little bit different, but it's also managing. You can't also, at the same time, that's why we're trying to spend some of it down on the capital and not go to the towns with, you know, with the capital. So, and I'll take feedback on it, you know, from looking over the towns, like, you know, we want feedback on like how that juggles, but that's how I'm seeing it. And it's been working the last few years.
You're talking about what you, in an ideal world, what you'd like to do. That's not what we're actually doing. We don't have a $500,000 rainy day fund.
We do with school choice right now, if we aren't using it to offset the
But
budget.
it's earmarked for.
A lot of it is earmarked for
Yeah,
Pope,
yeah.
but we're still gonna have $600,000 remaining. And then going into the next year, we're not gonna suddenly lose, barring disaster, all our school choice. You know what I mean? Like, it could come down, knock on wood, right? But yeah, you're gonna have that, you have your fluxes, but you're not gonna come down, you know.
And if we had a year like when he was principal, where we had $1 million going out and $1 million coming in.
Assistant principal back then.
Well,
I just wanna make sure.
I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. So you could imagine if it was that type of year this year, we couldn't do the parking lot, but there's a lot of other things we couldn't do either. It might be more than 6 or 7 people.
Trevor.
If we,
Oh, sorry, sorry, Bob. I didn't mean to cut you off. You're, but, okay, all right.
Thank you. I just want to thank you about allowing the town a little bit, you know, speak this early in the process too. We are in a tough spot. You know, it's so devastating, right, to see those numbers and all the other things that we have to spend money on to run the town other than just education. You know, it's 62% of our budget. Everything else has to be run on that other 40. So I really appreciate you looking at the numbers the way you are. You know, I look at I think when I first started in school committee, it was maybe 14,000 to educate a child. It's almost double that right now in just a short 10 years, 15 years, something like that. And then looking at the amount of students, you know, probably 100 kids less, 114 kids less. You know what, we haven't really cut, you know, we do level service and we haven't really cut positions much, you know, over that time frame too. So everything else has gotten very expensive. So I appreciate you looking at staff cuts. Not that we want to ever, but where you can get attrition, you know, where we can kind of reduce those areas to make sure we can still fund the arts and walk that fine balance of making sure kids want to come here. I mean, that's the reason our school and our district is so sought after, is because you've looked at the arts and not just sports, but sports as well. I mean, it's hard for these other towns in the north. They're trying to group together because it's just not enough kids and not enough programs, and a lot of kids are coming here. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I know it's hard. I appreciate you thinking about the town and where we're at, and very grateful for looking at those reductions that would help the town, you know, handle our hits as well as, you know, going to help the elementary school as well. And it's just going to be a tough year. So cuts are never fun, but I appreciate you doing that and trying to come in at a number that we can handle this year. It's going to be a hard year, so look forward to next month. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions from the public? Anybody from around this table? I don't think anybody's raising their hand over there. But
We need a motion to move we need a number, we need a voted
Oh,
number
yes.
to move forward to the, on record of what we're moving forward.
I will move a tentative budget figure of, should I look up exactly? I can put this back now. $13,802,875.
Second.
Do we need to have the other components of that as part of the?
It's a, I would say because you're not voting the budget. When we vote the budget, we go through every single one to make sure we have all the numbers correct. You're just moving this budget to the public hearing. We'll bring that forward, and then, I think you're gonna be okay. Would you agree?
With this plan, that we are talking about actually cutting the budget, not using another funding source. Like, I want to make sure that everyone is clear that that's what we're moving forward with. And if not, let's continue to talk about it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this number?
Just so I'm understanding, so we're saying this is what would go to the public hearing, not that we're approving this budget?
Correct.
Is that right?
And this is the number that we can go lower, but we can't go higher, correct?
It's the recommendation of your budget committee.
And, hold on, so the part where we would potentially go lower, I just want to talk about, so I don't quite understand, and I'm sorry, I need to talk about process, but so, okay, so we would vote on this, and it would go to a public hearing, and there would be feedback, and we would need to take into consideration a town or some comment saying, this is not possible, it has to be less than this, we have to find more reduction to make. Is that?
So we'll present at the public hearing this number, if it's consensus. Also on the same agenda will be FY27 budget. That way, if we need another discussion about taking the number down, we can do that.
And
It also announces, so we're gonna send this, the town administrators, there's two were on the call. I don't know if Veronica's still on, I think she may have dropped off, but they're waiting for this number. So they can bring it to their finance committees, and their finance committees are gonna dive into it and say yay or nay, or what's gonna give our feedback on it. It's interesting, we have folks here tonight, which is great, but normally they come to the hearing after they've seen the number to give us feedback. And it's great they're here tonight, which is speeding up the process, because it's a tough budget year. There's always more interest when it's a tough budget year. When we have a good budget, and it's a good budget year, they're like, don't bother coming and talk to us. We like what we see, right? So I'm going to send this budget out to the town administrators. They're going to share it with everybody, and then they're going to give us their feedback. That's where I was kind of saying to Damien earlier, like, we have to give them the honest where we want to land so that they can give us feedback that says, this is where, and they'll come in and explain where they're at. Or they'll say, no, you got us to a point, we like where you're at. We're going to try to make this work. And we'll bring it to the public, and then it's got to fly in town meeting.
And 3 out of the 4 towns vote on it, and it passes. If one doesn't, out of luck.
It actually should be geared to a +1. It shouldn't be 3 out of 4 anymore, since that's a Supreme Court case. I don't know if you've ever gotten just fresh.
So we have the public hearing.
Now they'll
We
leave it
take
down.
additional feedback, whether it's feedback we've received between now and then, because we may get messages that say, this is still not doable. We have an additional discussion at that meeting. We go back and do any more work if we need to behind the scenes based on the direction of the committee. 2 days later, we have another meeting where we're voting on whatever that final number is.
And then that final number distributes to each of their towns, which then have to have the town meeting to approve that final.
And if it completely hits the fan,
Oh,
then we
snap.
actually could come back the following Monday and have another meeting, and have 3 meetings on the budget within
So
that
long
time
as it's
frame. But
within
then we're out of
45
time.
days. All right. Any other clarification needed before we take a vote on this general fund? We have a motion and a second to move forward this general fund number to the public hearing. I'm going to start with Damien first, since you're easy for me to miss over there.
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Olivia?
Yes.
Celia?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Bill? Bob?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
All right, that's the number you're working with.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's a hard one.
I'll email you the slide deck tomorrow. If you have questions, send them my way, and if I can answer them quickly, I know I will. Otherwise, I'll bring them back for the group like we did with the school choice questions.
And that is separate from the parking lot discussion that we have kind of woven into this a little bit. Do we need to take a vote on that or leave that for?
I think it can, unless, we should have a discussion about it. And if there's a larger group that feels like we should not be assessing the towns for capital project, given the state of the budget, then you would vote on that. But I guess our recommendation is to move to the March
Yeah, we
meeting.
just,
When do we get within anybody's warrant closing? Because we'd have to get the capital article on the warrant before anybody's warrant closes. I know it's so many days back from the first town meeting. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
could
how many
wait till
days.
the March.
But the March meeting would be
We're still
sufficient.
okay?
Because that's before.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking of timelines and whatnot, but at the same time, you really can't move forward with this without the public hearing because of the conversation about it. If you go and spend the money, you kind of, you kind of block the.
Oh, we
rail
won't
of
spend the
decision.
money.
Not spend the money. If you commit to spend the money, then you railroad one option only. Or close.
I wonder if it makes sense to table a discussion on the parking lot. We've been open that this is part of the piece. You guys will get some feedback from the town, and we can have that as part of the discussion in March, because it will be on the agenda in
Right.
March.
The only thing I want to add that's changed in the parking lot, okay, we're going to conservation right now, Conservation Commission, so that we're still moving kind of forward to get our ducks in a row, is that we took the rural aid out and we applied it to the budget.
Right.
Okay, so
we'll
we
use
took
more
$100,
school
so
choice.
it'd be $100,000 more of school choice now being applied to that. And the reason why we did rural aid is that I just think it's the appropriate use of rural aid. It also was in the governor's budgets. I have hopes that we'll at least get level funded. And Jessica's wide-eyed over there because she's knee-deep in rural aid advocacy. But it also kind of sends a message, I hope, that we're using it in that capacity rather than to offset the operating budget. So that's the one change that's happened, just keeping people upright. So we don't have to do anything.
but the vote that we just took was to recommend the budget that included the use of the school choice for the parking lot.
No.
No, we don't.
That's
vote on
separate.
the general
Opposite.
fund.
We used rural aid to reduce the budget by $100,000.
Parking lot has nothing to do with that vote you just took. Nothing
So
whatsoever.
it's.
When we vote on the March 5th meeting, both pieces have to be voted on, because we're then assessing them.
So we need to make a motion to table the parking lot until March meeting?
I think
Was
that,
it on
I
the
don't
agenda?
think- yeah.
it is on the agenda today, yeah. And that's just, I wonder if that doesn't make more sense to table it. So you've got a motion to table it?
I'll second that.
Perfect. Damien? This would be a vote to table the parking lot decision until March.
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
Olivia?
Yes.
Celia?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Bill? Bob?
Yes.
Yes?
I would say no, only because I would approve it today.
Keith?
Yes.
Yes.
Dan, thank you. All right.
Can I say one thing about the enrollment slide that was the two?
Yeah.
It's because of Excel, so they're rounding and it's throwing off the percentage points. So when you just do the math as it is, yes, it should be -1, but
471.
it's rounded.
We have half children.
Yeah, well, because they do everything based on
Pretend it's
FTE.
solid.
8.4, right?
Everything's based on full-time equivalent, so if a student leaves the district or comes into the district, they don't count as a whole, but then they're rounding it so that there's no decimal points, so it's skewing the numbers.
I think I was just worried that like if a town was off by, like the,
Yeah.
Okay,
you know,
makes
we're
a huge
small enough
difference,
towns
yeah.
that we were off by a
Yep.
kid, that it's like actually kind of a significant difference
Right.
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Makes sense.
search and rescue, because we're missing half the crew. But no, yeah. No, actually point those out because, but Shelley also likes to make sure she's,
I don't, I hate mistakes, so.
and we love that she hates mistakes.
Yes.
Good quality, yeah.
Yeah, it's good enough. Round up.
On a positive note, we've got a Yankee Candle donation to talk about.
Yes?
George talked about it last month.
We
but-
received a check from Yankee Candle for $3,000 for their $4,000.
$4,000.
But it was not on the agenda to vote to
Yes.
accept, because so you were just voting to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept the donation from Yankee Candle.
Second?
All right, all the seconds. All right, Damien,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Olivia,
Yes.
Celia,
Yes.
Mary, Bill,
Yep.
Bob, yes, Phil,
Yeah.
Keith,
Yes.
Diane, thank you. All right, thank you to Yankee Candle. We will negate your comments about lower amounts then. And then we've got a policy first read. I don't know, that you want to give some backstory?
So basically, it's a new policy, KIB, Parent Observation of the Classroom. Currently, we do have a policy on the books for special education. It specifically talks about parents visiting classrooms in regards to special education or special education programs. We've been using that policy for other non-special education visits, but it's come to the point where we do need to have very clear visitation policies and process when parents come into our classrooms to observe their child and teachers. And basically this particular policy, you'll see it's kind of longer than usual because when I constructed it, I took it from other MASC policies that are out there, but I also put in language that could be very user-friendly reading as a parent wanted to do this. Right? A lot of our policies are very legal, a lot more legal heavy-handed there. So this is a first reading to get feedback on. I'm already starting to get feedback. I'll take any feedback I get and then bring it to the next one if there's any adjustments. Okay?
And we'll vote on it next month.
And we vote on it next month.
How many, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
How common is it for parents to come in and visit or observe?
Once or twice a year per building. Non-special ed, even less. But if it's not clear, usually people aren't coming in because they're happy.
Yes.
Because they may be volunteers in the classroom. That kind of thing. So usually, sometimes there's strain there, and we just want to make sure that people are, if you go through the policy, you can kind of see about they're not sharing information, they're not think they can come and pull their phones out, disrupting the class, trying to engage with, that kind of thing. So it's just kind of making sure that they're not disrupting the rights of everybody else in the classroom when they're doing a visitation.
Jess, you?
Just want to share to the public, I've emailed with Darius, the policy says that an observing parent may be asked to sign a confidentiality agreement. And I said I would be in favor of that. Would you like to share your response?
I agree. If there is, and that might be something, I'll try to see, I said, when Jessica wrote that to me, I said, absolutely, I think we should add that to it. I do want to see what the attorney says and so forth, but there is a level where if a parent comes in and observes a classroom and then with posting online and stuff, could post about who they saw, what they saw, and that kind of level of other students, which they don't have the right to share outside that space.
Could even just be verbally sharing that, which is still problematic and a violation of.
I was going to like a very where you can see it get very ugly if someone jumped online and said,
about all of that.
Susie was having a tantrum in the classroom today. I observed, so yeah, which could happen.
Is there a separate policy for online classes when we still have them?
No.
Because that's certainly something I heard about both from parents and from teachers during the Zoom years of being problematic.
Yeah, I didn't see that either.
And
when I was
raising other
researching
questions along those lines. So,
I'll look into that.
Yeah, especially considering that new program, which will have some access for patients, still at work.
So that's going to be, they're going to be in the in the building.
Okay,
And the teacher's
okay.
going to be in the building as well, so it's
All right.
just, so it's not.
I thought there was some online
No,
portion of it.
it's an online component, but everything is internal.
But the instruction is,
Yeah.
okay.
During school day.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there another hand?
I was just gonna say, I think during COVID, when people were at home and the parents were all in the background, that was a much different, much less supply, that we were all just doing our best, but now that they're having them in, computer labs or things in schools, it's less likely that the parents are in the background watching what's going on in the classrooms.
Yep, I was just gonna ask, what is a local equivalent of a volunteer?
Depending on whether or not, I guess, I don't know.
Okay.
I could-
I just wasn't sure what
That's
the.
probably why it's
what-
highlighted.
All right. That's all I have.
Public sector.
Not sure if there was some special consideration. All right, almost at the end. I have just an update on superintendent evaluations, that the plan is to have Google Forms ready to go out for those by March 5th, and to go out on March 6th. So we'll have a nice reminder around the time that we have our next meeting that those will be heading out. And ideally, we'd like to have those back within a week or two for a couple reasons. One is that we are all less likely to do them if we wait much longer than that. So if we get that out and returned as quickly as possible, we can compile all the information to present at the April meeting. Have other, budget committee has done their part in for presenting today. You have any other committees that have a report to share? You have anything from the collaborative?
Oh, God.
I know, sorry, it's on there, I have to ask, but I know that.
Executive
answers are
director
pretty-
process has not gone smoothly. There's more marathon meetings in the future.
Do you have any updates?
I did send an email out to everyone regarding Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who's going to retire, is intent to retire at the end of this year. And I think she'll be at the joint meeting in April, and we'll get a chance to recognize her then, but she is. And it's June 30th, the end of her contract is June 30th, so.
Is refusing to accept the retirement.
Is that- No, it should be pretty even, or maybe some savings. Yeah. Minimal savings, most likely. She wasn't paid any higher anything.
We always pay more to replace people though, like the market just.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I see you packing up. Would you like to make a motion that's associated with that? All right.
I'll second that.
All right, Damien?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Olivia?
Absolutely.
Celia?
Yes.
Mary? Bill?
Yeah.
Bob? Yes.
Yes.
Phil? Keith? Diane? Thank you very much for your attention.